Well, it's May, and if you live in the United States and go to school, you know what that means. It's time for finals! Yes, students all across the country are getting ready to take their final exams, and of course, that means a lot of stress. I'm taking my finals for my last year of college soon, and for whatever reason, it got me thinking about video game quizzes. Now, I'm not talking about quizzes about video games, though you don't need to look hard to find those, but rather I'm talking about quizzes in video games. These are the times where the game doesn't ask you to kill a bunch of enemies or solve a platforming challenge, it just wants you to answer some questions. Now, maybe it's my love of quizzes and trivia, but I love when games do this. I think that games testing your knowledge of what you've been playing is a really cool idea because if you've been paying attention, you'll be rewarded with prizes or the ability to move forward. So in order to help me and you de-stress for finals, we'll be talking about my favorite video game quizzes. As for rules, I'm not counting quiz games like Buzz or You Don't Know Jack. It needs to be a quiz in an otherwise quiz-free game. And on the same note, no educational or edutainment games because quizzes are expected in that genre and, let's be fair, most of them are pretty boring. And of course, one game per series. So without further ado, this is my top 10 quizzes in video games. Up first we have SpiderMan Web of Shadows. In this game, Spider-Man has to deal with an army of symbiotes, an alien race able to transfuse themselves onto a host. The game features a choice system where Spider-Man can take either the good red path or the evil black path. It's not a bad mechanic in theory, but it ultimately ends up hindering the story. But one instance I admittedly find kinda cool is the fight with Wolverine. The two meet in the middle of the city and they start fighting each other because, you know, the entire city's being overrun by aliens, so they should definitely have a battle instead of helping out. Because that's what heroes do. Actually, Wolverine's not convinced that Spider-Man is a good guy, so he'll ask him trivia questions about the Marvel Universe so he can prove he's the real thing.
Whose killers did we track in Berlin?
Now, if you're not familiar with Marvel trivia, you might struggle to answer the questions, and since you gain red path or black path points depending on your answer, I can see how some people would call this frustrating. But for me, even as someone who couldn't really care about the Marvel Universe, I still think this is a neat addition and it will certainly appeal to longtime Marvel fans. And hey, they'll probably get a chuckle from Spider-Man's wrong answers.
What are your parents' names?
Ben and May. Oh, you said parents. This is gonna hurt.
Wrong answer.
The Fallout series is known for a couple of things. Post-apocalyptic wastelands, colorful characters, action-heavy and sometimes ridiculous combat, glitches, and of course a buttload of references to pop culture. And one that comes to mind when thinking about quizzes is the Bridgekeeper from Fallout 2. On your journey through the ruins of the southwestern United States, you might randomly come across the Bridgekeeper. If you approach him, he'll ask you to answer me these questions 3 ere the other side he see. Which I think is a reference to something, but I can't quite figure out what.
I don't know that!
Anyway, he'll ask you some questions about names and quests before asking you a rather specific question related to the game. Answer wrong and you instantly die, but answer correctly and you'll be allowed to pass unharmed. But if you answer his question with another question... again, I can't help but feel like I've seen this somewhere before. So yeah, if you confuse him, the Bridgekeeper ends up dying, rather grotesquely too. I kinda feel bad now. I mean, he was just doing his job of standing in front of a bridge and asking random strangers for their personal information. But anyway, he's dead now, so feel free to loot his corpse. Let's move on to a game from the British company that embodies fun, exciting, and groundbreaking games. Kinda. Rareware, or just Rare. I don't think I need to introduce Rare to most of you, but suffice to say they were a gaming powerhouse in the late 80s and the 90s. And the game that solidified their status in the industry was Donkey Kong Country, released in 1994. But if we jump a year ahead, we get the sequel, superior in basically every way, Donkey Kong Country 2. One of the characters introduced in this game was Swanky Kong, a glittery gorilla who hosts Swanky's Bonus Bonanza. It's a game show where you can earn extra lives by answering trivia questions. There's really not much more to say about this, it's just a fun little minigame that's more of a distraction than anything. But there's something to Swanky's Bonus Bonanza that's incredibly charming. Maybe it's the flashy game show aesthetic, or maybe it's Swanky's snazzy outfit. Maybe it's these quiz titles. I mean, how can you not be excited to try out Baboon Booty? Or maybe it's that super catchy music. for me at least, this is the kind of fun and silly addition that was what Rare was all about back in the day. In fact, keep watching and you might see another Rare franchise somewhere on this list. The typing of the dead is awesome. You already know that if you've played the game already, but if you haven't, I'm sure you can imagine how badass it is to kill zombies not by aiming a gun and shooting, but by typing out words and phrases on the keyboard. Now, despite being a typing game, I don't consider it educational because it doesn't really teach you how to type. It just expects you to be able to type a series of words in quick succession. And since it's not an educational game and hence is not disqualified from this list, I get to talk about the awesome silliness that is the Tower Battle. If you're familiar with House of the Dead 2, which Typing of the Dead is based on, you know that at the end of Chapter 3, Darkness, you fight the snake-like enemy Tower. In Typing of the Dead, the first stage of this boss takes the form of a quiz, and you deal damage whenever you type out a correct answer. The quiz itself isn't really that challenging, but the idea that you defeat a giant snake monster by answering trivia questions is just hilarious to me. Of course, the second stage of the fight is the same as any other boss in this game, which is why this entry isn't higher on the list. Still, I can't deny how stupid and yet how awesome the Tower Battle is. Just like the rest of Typing of the Dead, actually. Earthworm Jim is a quirky, bizarre, and all-around strange game. What other game can you recall that has you launch a cow into space in order to proceed? And in a series like this, the game show from Earthworm Jim 2 actually makes perfect sense, in that it doesn't make any sense at all. In the stage Villi people, also known as Blind Sally, also known as Jim's now a blind cave salamander, and no, I didn't make any of those names up, there are mealworms scattered all around for you to collect. You'll want to grab as many as you can because in the middle of the stage you suddenly find yourself as the contestant on a game show. Each mealworm you collect gives you a question. The questions on this show are, fittingly for Earthworm Jim, completely nonsensical and totally ridiculous. Here's an example. If Dan was stuck in Mexico City, how many days would it take before he would eat? Well, obviously the answer is Mexican food is good and Dan is evil. Yeah, take that, Dan, you stupid idiot. Dan is the worst name ever. I hate everybody named Dan. But anyway, there's no penalty for getting a question wrong, but you get prizes for every correct answer, so there is an incentive to get it right. Which is easier said than done with questions like this. I can't lie though and say that I don't enjoy how goofy it is. And sometimes a little bit of insanity is a good thing. With a franchise that has several story-based entries and a fairly deep lore like Mega Man, you might expect a quiz in these games to have some questions related to the series. Well, in the case of the Pakti Village quizzes from Mega Man Legends 2, you'd be entirely wrong. After you defeat Tronbon in Pakti Village and donate enough Zenny to repair the town, you'll be able to take a series of quizzes inside the mayor's residence. But this quiz isn't about Mega Man Legends or about Mega Man in general. Instead, it's a series of general trivia questions about real-world things. And out of all the questions in the quiz, only one relates to Mega Man at all. Instead, you get to answer questions about John Hinckley Jr., the Sex Pistols, Fyodor Dostoevsky, and the Edict of Milan. All of which a kid playing this game would know about, right? And the kicker is you get prizes for completing each series of 10 questions, but if you want to go for the ultimate prize, you have to answer 100 questions in a row without getting any wrong. Sure, this isn't a problem today, since there's no time limit on answering and all the questions are available online, but just imagine being a kid in 2000 playing this game. You're not going to know the answers to these questions unless you're a super genius, and the internet could only help you so much back then. Bottom line is, the Pakti Village quizzes are memorable, even if they are pretty confusing. Most of the quizzes on this list so far have been enjoyable and/or silly, but we're gonna change gears to one that's more disturbing. And what could be more disturbing than Silent Hill? Specifically, I'm talking about Silent Hill 2. A lot of 2s in this list. In Brookhaven Hospital, there's an elevator that lets you go up to the higher floors. When you press the button, however, the elevator suddenly starts playing a game show over the speaker by the name of Trick or Treat.
Welcome to another exciting edition of Trick or Treat!
This is an optional puzzle where you'll be asked a series of questions and you have to enter the answers on a locked box on the 3rd floor. Answer correctly and you get ammo and some ampules. Answer incorrectly and you get injured, with no way to complete the puzzle. So the reward is fairly simple, and one could argue that it makes this scene rather pointless overall, but I put this at number 4 because of how well the quiz fits into the game. Yeah, the announcer voice is pretty cheesy at first, but as the questions get more and more disturbing, it honestly becomes really creepy.
Corn, smashed bones, splattered blood, and finally, glittered tears. What a terrible tragedy.
But the best part has to be Maria's reaction when the game show ends.
What was that?
And they never speak about it again. Okay, so I already talked about Paper Mario The 1000-Year Door in my last top 10 list, and I tried to avoid putting the super fun quirk quiz on this list, but I just couldn't leave it off. Quizzes have been a staple of the Paper Mario series since the original, and the super fun quirk quiz is definitely the best of the bunch. You encounter this Thwomp statue 2 times in the game, and each time he won't let you proceed until you answer his questions. They're questions related to the game, so if you've been exploring and paying attention, they shouldn't be a problem. I mean, that's really all there is to this one, it's just a really fun quiz. You might think I'm just putting this on the list because I love the 1000-Year Door and... well, yeah, you're absolutely right. But I feel justified in giving it a high spot because it was the first time I ever encountered a quiz in a video game, and it's been ingrained in my mind ever since. Maybe you consider that me being biased, but I don't really care because I'm already moving on to the next game, so you can't tell me what to do anymore. I'm going on to the next one. You're not gonna tell me what I can do on my own show. Undertale is a game that you may or may not have heard of. I personally never got that into it like everyone else did, but one element that I absolutely loved was the characters. There's something in the writing and personalities that never fail to make me smile. And my favorite character by far is Mettaton. He's a super deadly robot who's armed to the teeth and won't hesitate to kill you. He's also a TV star. When you battle him for the first time, he makes you the contestant of his game show. The rules are simple: get the questions right, or you die! Similar to Earthworm Jim 2's game show, the questions are more random and silly, and not all of them tie into the game. But out of all the quizzes on this list, I think this one's the funniest. If you know Undertale, you know that it gets pretty serious. This quiz is not serious in the slightest. It's a lot like the Impossible Quiz if you've ever played that. Only this has the added element of a killer robot. Fun fact, this was actually the first thing I ever saw from Undertale. I didn't know who the characters were, I didn't know anything about the game, I just knew that this was a damn funny quiz. And it got me really excited to play Undertale because it seemed like it was right up my alley. Then I actually played the game and, it was good, I guess. I love the Banjo Kazooie series. The first game is a classic Nintendo 64 platformer that perfectly captures the fun and tightly constructed gameplay the genre is known for. And its sequel, Banjo Tooie, I consider to be my favorite video game of all time. And one of the Banjo Kazooie traditions is a quiz show right before the final boss. Having said all that, you Banjo Kazooie fans might expect me to put the Tower of Tragedy as the #1 video game quiz, but in fact, I did not. While I do love the Tower of Tragedy, the honor instead goes to Grunty's Furnace Fun from Banjo Kazooie. After beating the 9 worlds and climbing to the top of Gruntilda's tower, Banjo and Kazooie suddenly find themselves in a bizarre board game/game show with the witch Gruntilda as the host. And what's more, I think you'll find, she gives the quiz entirely in rhyme. I couldn't help myself, I'm sorry. You have to walk across the board answering questions or solving challenges on each square to proceed. Most spaces give you a trivia question, but sometimes you'll have to play one of the mini games with a certain stipulation, such as an added time limit. Not only is this the perfect way to wrap up the game before the final boss, it does what no other quiz on this list does and lets the player decide how it continues. There are branching paths on the board and each space is a different category. If you know the layout, you can avoid questions that you don't like altogether, such as the squares that kill you instantly if you get it wrong. That, coupled with the quirky nature of the questions, the upbeat music, and of course the rhyming, make this the best quiz in video games.